The breath left Natalie Reed's lungs in ragged gasps as rough hands shoved her into the snowdrift, her body tumbling down the steep ravine like a discarded piece of refuse. She tried to scream, but her brother's fist had already done its damage to her jaw, and all that escaped was a pitiful whimper that the howling Wyoming wind swallowed whole. Above her, silhouetted against the gray December sky of 1885, stood her own flesh and blood, her brother Thomas and her uncle Jacob, watching her fall with eyes as cold as the storm gathering overhead. "Should have kept your mouth shut about Pa's will," Thomas called down, his voice barely reaching her through the wind. "This ranch is ours now, and nobody's going to believe a word you say if you ain't around to say it." Natalie's fingers clawed at the snow, trying to find purchase, trying to pull herself up, but the cold had already begun its insidious work. Her dress, soaked through from the snow, clung to her skin like ice. She watched helplessly as the two figures above turned their backs and walked away, leading her horse with them, leaving her to die in the wilderness 15 miles south of Rock Springs, Wyoming. The irony was not lost on her, even as consciousness began to slip. Her father had died just 3 weeks ago, leaving his considerable ranch to be split between his 3 children. But Thomas had always been greedy, and Uncle Jacob had always whispered poison in his ear. The cold was a living thing, wrapping around her bones, seeping into her muscles. She tried to move, but her limbs refused to obey. Snow began to fall harder, fat flakes that settled on her eyelashes, her hair, her blue lips. This was how she would die, she thought dimly. 22 years old, murdered by her own kin for money and land. The darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, and she let it come, too tired to fight anymore. She did not know how long she lay there. Time lost meaning in the white void. But through the gathering darkness, she heard something. Hoofbeats. The soft nicker of a horse, a man's voice rough and concerned. "Jesus Christ," the voice said, and then strong hands were lifting her, and she felt herself being pulled against something warm and solid. "Stay with me now. Can you hear me? Stay with me." She tried to open her eyes, but they were frozen shut. She tried to speak, but her jaw would not move. All she could do was exist in this strange half-world between life and death as she felt herself being lifted onto a horse, felt the animal's warmth beneath her, felt the man's arms around her, holding her steady against his chest. "Gotta get you warm," he was saying, and she could feel the vibration of his voice through his chest. "My cabin's not far. Just hold on." The ride seemed to last forever, and no time at all. She drifted in and out, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the man's arms keeping her from falling. Then there was the creak of a door, the blessed absence of wind, and she was being laid down on something soft. She heard the snap and crackle of a fire being built, felt blankets being piled on top of her, felt her wet clothes being carefully removed and replaced with something dry and warm. "Come on now," the voice said again, closer this time. "Don't you die on me. I didn't ride out in this storm just to watch you slip away." Warm liquid touched her lips, and she managed to swallow. Broth, rich and salty. It burned going down her throat, but it was a good burn, a living burn. More blankets, more warmth. The man's hands rubbing her arms, her legs, trying to get the blood flowing again. She wanted to thank him, but the darkness pulled her under once more. When she woke, it was to the sound of wind howling against wooden walls and the warm glow of firelight dancing across a rough-hewn ceiling. Her body ached in ways she had never experienced, a deep bone weariness that made even breathing feel like effort. But she was alive. Impossibly, miraculously alive. "Easy now," that same voice said, and she turned her head to see a man rising from a chair beside the bed. He was tall, she could tell even with him sitting, with broad shoulders and dark hair that curled slightly at his neck. His face was weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into sun and wind. But his eyes themselves were kind, a deep brown that held genuine concern as he looked down at her. "You have been out for near about 2 days. Thought I might lose you there for a while." "Where?" she managed to croak, her throat raw and painful. "My cabin," he said, reaching for a cup on the table beside the bed. "About 12 miles south of Rock Springs. Name's Noah Ashford. I was checking my trapline when I found you in that ravine. What in God's name were you doing out there?" The memories came flooding back, and with them, a surge of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Her brother, her uncle, the betrayal, the cold. She tried to sit up, but Noah's hand gently pressed her back down. "Whoa, take it easy. You've got frostbite on your fingers and toes, though I think we caught it in time. You're in no condition to be moving around yet." "They left me," she whispered, the words tumbling out. "My brother and uncle. They took me out there and they left me to die." Noah's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. "Your own family." She nodded, and the tears came harder now. "My father died 3 weeks ago, left us the ranch. But Thomas wanted it all. He and Uncle Jacob, they have been planning something, I know it. I heard them talking about forging documents, making it look like Pa left everything to Thomas. When I confronted them, she could not finish the sentence. Noah was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "What's your name?" Natalie Reed." "Well, Miss Reed, I reckon you are safe here for as long as you need. Storm's still raging outside, has been for 2 days straight. Even if your brother thinks to come looking to make sure you are dead, he would not make it through this weather. We have got time to figure out what to do next." She looked at him, this stranger who had saved her life, and felt something shift in her chest. "Why did you help me?" Noah looked surprised by the question. "What kind of man would I be if I left a woman to freeze to death? Besides, I know the Reed Ranch. Your father was a good man. Bought horses from him a few times. He spoke highly of his daughter." His expression softened. "That was you, I reckon." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were different. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than grief and fear. She felt hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my life." "Thank me when you are back on your feet," Noah said, but there was a gentle smile tugging at his lips. "For now you need to rest and heal. I will bring you some more broth." Over the next few days, as the storm continued to rage outside, Natalie began to regain her strength. The frostbite on her fingers and toes turned out to be minor, thanks to Noah's quick action in warming her slowly and carefully. He was attentive without being overbearing, checking on her regularly, bringing her food, keeping the fire stoked high. The cabin was small but well built, with thick walls that kept out the worst of the wind. There was a single room with a bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs near the fireplace, and shelves lined with supplies. Furs hung from the walls, and there was a small window covered with oiled paper that let in weak light during the day. It was a bachelor's dwelling, neat but sparse, the home of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. "How long have you lived here?" she asked on the 3rd day, when she was finally able to sit up without feeling dizzy. Noah was stirring something in a pot over the fire, his back to her. "About 5 years now. Came out from Missouri after the war. Tried my hand at ranching, but found I preferred trapping and hunting. Less complicated than dealing with livestock and ranch hands." "You were in the war." She'd been only a child then, but she remembered the stories, the way people spoke in hushed tones about the horrors back east. "Confederate, though I was not fighting for slavery," he said quietly. "My family was poor. We did not own slaves, did not believe in it. But when your state secedes, you do not have much choice but to fight. Lost a lot of friends. Lost my taste for killing." He turned to face her, his expression somber. "Found peace out here, in the quiet. Just me and the land and the animals." She studied him in the firelight. He was probably around 30, she guessed, though the weathering of his face made it hard to tell. There was a sadness in him, buried deep but still visible if you knew where to look, a loneliness that matched her own. "I'm sorry," she said. "That must have been terrible." "We all carry our scars," Noah replied, bringing her a bowl of stew. "Yours are just fresher than mine." The stew was simple but good, made with venison and root vegetables. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling strength return to her body with each mouthful. As she ate, she found herself watching Noah move about the cabin with an easy confidence. He was graceful for such a large man, his movements economical and sure. There was something comforting about his presence, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. "The storm's letting up," Noah said the next morning, peering out through the window. "Should be clear enough to travel in another day or two." Natalie's stomach tightened with anxiety. "Travel where?" Into Rock Springs, I figure. You will need to report what happened to the sheriff. Your brother cannot be allowed to get away with attempted murder." She shook her head, fear rising in her throat. "You do not understand. Thomas has been cultivating relationships with everyone in town for months now. He is charismatic, charming. Everyone loves him. Who's going to believe me over him, especially when I show up accusing him of trying to kill me, but here I am, alive and well?" Noah frowned, settling into the chair across from her. "You think the sheriff would not investigate?" "I think the sheriff will hear my brother's side of the story first. Thomas will say I ran off, or that I went crazy with grief over Pa's death. He will make me sound hysterical or vindictive, and Uncle Jacob will back him up." She twisted her hands in her lap, feeling the helplessness wash over her again. "I have no proof. It is just my word against theirs." "You have got the will, though. Your father's will. That proves your right to a share of the ranch, which they are going to forge if they have not already. By the time I make it to town, they will have everything in order. Documents that show Pa left everything to Thomas. Maybe they will even have witnesses who will swear they saw Pa sign it." She looked up at him, her eyes desperate. "You do not know my brother. He is clever. He's been planning this for a long time." Noah was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "So what do you want to do?" The question surprised her. She had expected him to insist they go to the sheriff, to tell her that the law would protect her. Instead, he was asking her what she wanted, treating her like someone capable of making her own decisions. "I do not know," she admitted. "I just know I cannot go back there, not to that ranch, not with them." "You could go somewhere else," Noah suggested. "Denver, maybe, or California. Start fresh somewhere they cannot find you." The idea was tempting, but something in her rebelled against it. Run away and let them win? Let them steal everything Pa worked for, everything he wanted me to have? She shook her head. "No, I will not do that." "Then we need a plan," Noah said simply. "A way to prove what they did and get back what's rightfully yours." She looked at him in surprise. "We?" He met her gaze steadily. "I'm not in the habit of leaving things half-finished, Miss Reed. I pulled you out of that snow, which means I have got a stake in seeing you through this. Besides," and here his expression hardened, "I do not take kindly to men who hurt women, especially not family who betray their own blood." Something warm bloomed in Natalie's chest, something she had not felt in a very long time. Trust, and maybe something more, though she was afraid to name it. "You do not owe me anything," she said softly. "Maybe not," Noah agreed, "but I'm offering anyway. The question is, will you accept?" She thought about it, about this man who had saved her life and asked for nothing in return, about the kindness in his eyes and the strength in his hands, about the way he listened to her, really listened, without dismissing her concerns or her fears. In the space of just a few days, he had shown her more respect and consideration than her own brother had in years. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I will accept." Noah nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Good. Then let us figure out how to take down your brother." They spent the rest of the day talking, planning. Noah proved to be a careful thinker, asking questions, poking holes in ideas, helping her work through the possibilities. The more they talked, the more Natalie found herself relaxing, even laughing at some of Noah's dry observations. It felt good to laugh again, she realized. It felt good to have someone on her side. "The way I see it," Noah said as darkness fell outside, "we need evidence. Something concrete that proves your brother's intentions, and we need to move fast before he has time to solidify his position." "But how do we get evidence? It is not like Thomas is going to confess." "No, but men like your brother get arrogant. They think they have won, and they get sloppy." Noah leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "You said he was talking about forging documents. That means he has got to have a forger somewhere, someone he is working with. If we can find that person, get them to talk, we would have proof." Natalie's mind raced. "There is a man in Rock Springs, Martin Jessup. He used to work as a clerk for the land office, but Pa said he got fired for falsifying records. He has been doing odd jobs around town ever since, mostly gambling and drinking. Thomas has been seen with him recently." "There you go," Noah said. "That is where we start. We find Jessup, we get him to talk, and we have got your brother dead to rights." But how do we get him to talk? He's not just going to admit to forgery. Noah's smile was not entirely pleasant. Leave that to me. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. That night, lying in the bed while Noah took the floor by the fire, despite her protests, Natalie stared up at the ceiling and thought about the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been drowning in grief and fear, trapped in a house with people who wanted her dead. Now, she was in a trapper's cabin in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, planning to take back what was rightfully hers. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt right. She thought about Noah, about the way he moved and spoke, about the gentleness in his hands when he checked her frostbitten fingers, and the steel in his voice when he talked about her brother. He was unlike any man she had ever known. Not loud or boastful like the ranch hands, not smooth and charming like Thomas, just steady, solid, real. "Noah," she said softly into the darkness. "Yeah?" His voice came from near the fireplace. "Why are you really doing this? You could take me to town, leave me with the sheriff, and be done with it. Why are you helping me?" There was a long silence. Then, "I told you, I do not leave things half-finished. That is not all of it, though, is it?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more vulnerable. "I watched a lot of people die in the war, Miss Reed. Good people who deserved better. After a while, you start to feel like maybe there is no justice in the world, no fairness, just random chance and cruelty." She heard him shift in the darkness. "But then sometimes you get a chance to make things right, to help someone who deserves it. And I figure when those chances come along, you take them. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" Natalie felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were not tears of sadness. "My father would have liked you," she said. "I'm glad," Noah replied. "Now get some sleep. We've got work to do in the morning." The storm had blown itself out by dawn, leaving the world buried in fresh white snow that sparkled in the weak winter sunlight. Noah was up early, checking his supplies and preparing for the journey into town. Natalie watched him work, noting the way he moved with purpose and efficiency. "We will need to be careful," he said as he packed saddlebags. "Your brother might have people watching for you, on the off chance you survived. We should take the back trails, avoid the main roads." "How will we find Jessup without being seen?" "I've got a friend in Rock Springs, runs a boarding house on the edge of town. She is discreet, asks no questions. We can stay there while we figure out Jessup's routine, find a way to corner him." Natalie pulled on the coat Noah had found for her, one of his own that hung large on her frame but was warm and well made. "Noah, what if this does not work? What if we cannot prove anything?" He paused in his packing and looked at her, his expression serious. "Then we figure out something else, but we do not give up. Agreed?" She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. "Agreed." The ride into Rock Springs took most of the day, following narrow trails that wound through forests and across frozen streams. Noah rode with easy confidence, his horse picking its way carefully through the snow. Natalie rode behind him on a second horse, one of two Noah kept for when he needed to haul supplies. She was not the strongest rider, but she managed, drawing on reserves of determination she had not known she possessed. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat some of the jerky and hardtack Noah had packed. Sitting on a fallen log, watching the steam rise from the horses' flanks in the cold air, Natalie found herself studying Noah's profile. He was watching the trail behind them, alert for any signs of pursuit. "You do this often?" she asked. "Help women who have been left for dead?" He glanced at her, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "First time, actually. Usually I stick to trapping and minding my own business. Then I'm especially grateful. Do not be grateful yet. Wait until we have won." But Natalie found that she was grateful anyway. Grateful not just for his help, but for his company. For the way he treated her like an equal, a partner in this endeavor rather than a helpless woman who needed protecting. She had spent so much of her life being dismissed, first by her mother who died when she was young, then by her brother, who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to his ambitions. Noah saw her differently. He saw her. They reached the outskirts of Rock Springs as dusk was falling. Noah led them around the main streets, keeping to the shadows and alleys. The boarding house he mentioned turned out to be a neat two-story structure on the eastern edge of town, painted white with green shutters. A hand-painted sign by the door read, "Mrs. Chen's Boarding House." Noah dismounted and helped Natalie down, his hands steady at her waist. "Wait here," he said, and went to knock on the door. A woman opened it almost immediately, short and sturdy with graying black hair pulled back in a bun. Her face was lined but kind, and when she saw Noah, she broke into a wide smile. "Noah Ashford, as I live and breathe. It has been 6 months since you darkened my door. Come in, come in." Then she noticed Natalie standing in the shadows, and her expression shifted to one of concern. "Who is this? Is she hurt?" "It is a long story, May," Noah said. "Can we come in? We need a place to stay for a few days, and we need to keep it quiet." Mrs. Chen's eyes sharpened, but she nodded immediately. "Of course. Bring your horses around back. Put them in the stable. I will get a room ready." 10 minutes later, Natalie found herself in a small but clean room on the second floor, with a real bed and a wash basin and curtains on the window. Mrs. Chen bustled about, bringing fresh towels and stoking the small stove in the corner. "You look like you have been through hell, child," she said to Natalie, her accent flavored with Cantonese but her English perfect. "Are you in trouble?" "Yes," Natalie admitted, "but Noah is helping me." Mrs. Chen nodded as if this was exactly what she expected. "He is a good man, that one. Quiet, keeps to himself mostly, but good. You're safe here. No one will bother you in my house." After Mrs. Chen left, Noah appeared in the doorway with a tray of food. "May's specialty," he said, setting it down on the small table. "Chicken and dumplings. Best in Wyoming, if you ask me." They ate together in comfortable silence, the warmth of the food and the room seeping into Natalie's bones. Through the window she could see the lights of Rock Springs twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there was her brother, living in her father's house, sleeping in her father's bed, thinking he had won. "Tomorrow we start looking for Jessup," Noah said, echoing her thoughts. "I will go into town, ask around, find out where he is staying and what he is up to. You should stay here. Stay out of sight." Natalie wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. If anyone saw her, word would get back to Thomas immediately. "Be careful," she said instead. "Always am." But as he stood to leave, she reached out and caught his hand. He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face, a question in his eyes. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything, for believing me, for helping me, for just being here." Noah's expression softened. He squeezed her hand gently. "You do not need to keep thanking me, Natalie. I'm right where I want to be." The use of her first name sent a little thrill through her. He had been calling her Miss Reed since they met, formal and proper. But now, in the quiet intimacy of the moment, that barrier had fallen away. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow we start fighting back." After he left, Natalie lay in the bed, her hands still warm from his touch, and thought about how much her life had changed in just 1 week. She had gone from despair to hope, from dying alone in the snow to having someone who cared whether she lived or died. And not just anyone. Noah. Strong, kind, damaged Noah, who saw the world clearly and chose to help anyway. She fell asleep thinking of his eyes and the way they looked at her like she mattered. Noah spent the next day in town, moving through the saloons and shops with the easy manner of someone who belonged there. He was careful to avoid anyone who might know of his connection to the Reed family, sticking to the rougher parts of town where Jessup was known to frequent. He found the man in a saloon called the Lucky Strike, hunched over a table with a half-empty bottle and a losing hand of cards. Martin Jessup was exactly what Noah expected. A thin, nervous man in his 40s, with watery eyes and the shaking hands of a heavy drinker. He wore a suit that had once been fine, but was now stained and threadbare. Noah watched him for an hour, noting the way Jessup drank steadily, the way he lost hand after hand but kept playing, the desperation that clung to him like a second skin. This was a man in deep, a man who could be pressured. Good. When Jessup finally stumbled out into the cold afternoon air, Noah followed at a distance. The man made his way through the streets, stopping once to peer into a store window with obvious longing, before continuing on to a shabby boarding house on the west side of town. Noah marked the location and headed back to Mrs. Chen's. Natalie was waiting anxiously when he returned, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "Well?" she asked as soon as he entered. "Found him. He's in bad shape, drinking heavy and gambling with money he does not have. I would bet your brother has him on a short leash. Probably promised him payment when everything is settled." "So how do we get to him?" Noah settled into the chair by the stove, thinking. "We wait until tonight, after he's had enough to drink that his judgment is compromised, but not so much he cannot talk. Then we corner him, offer him a way out." "What kind of way out?" "Money, maybe, or protection from your brother. Whatever he needs to hear to convince him to tell the truth." Noah met her eyes. "I need you to trust me on this. It might get uncomfortable." Natalie nodded slowly. "I trust you." Those 3 words meant more to Noah than they should have. He had known this woman for barely a week, and yet something about her had gotten under his skin. Her strength, maybe. The way she had survived something that should have killed her and come out the other side ready to fight. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, like he was someone worth knowing. That night, they waited in the alley behind the Lucky Strike, their breath fogging in the frigid air. Noah had positioned them where they could see the back door, where Jessup would exit when the saloon closed. Natalie stood close beside him, and he could feel her trembling from cold and nerves. "Easy," he murmured. "We have got this." When Jessup finally stumbled out, alone and unsteady, Noah moved fast. He grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him into the deeper shadows of the alley, one hand over his mouth to muffle any shout. "Quiet now," Noah said in his ear. "I just want to talk. You understand?" Jessup's eyes were wild with fear, but he nodded. Noah slowly removed his hand. "Who are you? What do you want?" Jessup's voice was high and panicked. "I want the truth about Thomas Reed and the documents you are forging for him." All the color drained from Jessup's face. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Do not lie to me." Noah's voice was hard. "I know Thomas hired you to forge his father's will. I know you are changing documents to make it look like he inherited everything. What I need is for you to admit it and testify to it." "I cannot. He will kill me. And what do you think I will do if you do not talk?" Noah let threat color his voice, though he had no real intention of hurting the man. But Jessup did not know that. "Please, you do not understand. Thomas Reed is connected. He has people in this town who will do whatever he says. If I cross him, I am a dead man." Natalie stepped forward into the light then, and Jessup's eyes went wide with recognition and shock. "You," he breathed. "But you are supposed to be dead. Thomas said you ran off, that you were unstable after your father died." "Thomas left me to die in the snow," Natalie said, her voice steady and cold. "My own brother tried to murder me so he could steal my inheritance. And you are helping him do it." Jessup looked between them, his face pale and sweating despite the cold. "I did not know. I swear I did not know he tried to kill you. He just said you had left, that you were out of the picture." "But you knew the documents were forged," Noah pressed. "You knew you were helping him steal from his own family." "I needed the money," Jessup whimpered. "I have debts, bad debts. Thomas promised me $500 if I handled the paperwork. I did not ask questions." "Well, I'm asking now," Natalie said, "and you are going to answer. You're going to tell the sheriff exactly what Thomas hired you to do, and you are going to show him the forged documents." "I cannot. He will what, kill you?" Noah's voice cut through the night like a blade. "He already tried to kill his own sister. You think he is going to let you live once you have served your purpose? Once those documents are filed and he has what he wants, you are a liability. He will get rid of you just like he tried to get rid of her." Jessup stared at him, and Noah could see the realization dawning in the man's eyes, the understanding that he had been a fool, that Thomas Reed had never intended to let him walk away. "But if you help us," Natalie said, her voice softer now, "if you testify, the law will protect you, and I will make sure you are paid for your trouble. Not as much as my brother promised, but enough to get you out of town and start over somewhere else." Jessup looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Shame, maybe, or regret. "How much?" $200, Natalie said. and safe passage to wherever you want to go." It was a gamble. Natalie did not have $200 to her name right now, but if they could prove Thomas's fraud, she would get her inheritance and then money would not be a problem. Jessup was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, I will do it. But we need to move fast. Thomas wants the documents filed day after tomorrow. Once that happens, it will be much harder to prove fraud." "Then we go to the sheriff first thing in the morning," Noah said. "You bring the forged documents and your testimony. We will bring Miss Reed and her story. Between all of us, the sheriff will have to investigate." They left Jessup in the alley with strict instructions to stay sober and stay alive until morning, then hurried back to Mrs. Chen's boarding house. Once safely in Natalie's room, they looked at each other, and suddenly they were both grinning. "We did it," Natalie breathed. "We actually got him to agree." "We are not done yet," Noah cautioned, but he was smiling too. "Still got to get through tomorrow, but yes, we did good tonight." On impulse, Natalie threw her arms around him, hugging him tight. Noah stiffened in surprise for a moment, then slowly, carefully, put his arms around her and hugged her back. She fit perfectly against his chest, he realized, like she had been made to be there. "Thank you," she whispered into his shirt. "I could not have done any of this without you." Noah rested his chin on top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "You are stronger than you think, Natalie Reed. You would have found a way." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and the expression in her eyes made his breath catch. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something warmer, something that made his heart beat faster. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I'm glad I did not have to do it alone." They stood like that for a long moment, neither wanting to break the connection. Noah became acutely aware of how close they were, how his hands spanned her back, how her fingers clutched his shirt, how easy it would be to lean down and kiss her. But no, it was too soon, too complicated. She was vulnerable, and he would not take advantage of that, no matter how much he wanted to. He stepped back gently, letting his hands fall to his sides. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Natalie nodded, but he could see the disappointment in her eyes, and it matched the disappointment in his own chest. "Good night, Noah." "Good night, Natalie." He left quickly before he could change his mind and do something foolish, something that felt increasingly like the only thing that made sense. Morning came cold and bright. Noah met Jessup outside the sheriff's office at 8 o'clock sharp, Natalie at his side. The forger looked terrible, pale and shaking, but he had the documents with him in a leather satchel. "Are you ready for this?" Noah asked him. Jessup nodded weakly. "I do not have much choice, do I?" The sheriff was a grizzled man in his 50s named Walter Pike, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He looked surprised to see Natalie walking into his office. "Miss Reed, I heard you had left town after your father passed. Your brother has been worried sick." "I am sure he has," Natalie said dryly. "Sheriff, I need to report a crime. My brother Thomas and my uncle Jacob attempted to murder me 6 days ago. They took me 15 miles south of town and left me in a ravine to freeze to death." Pike's eyebrows shot up. "That is a serious accusation." "I have got proof," Jessup said, his voice shaking. "Thomas Reed hired me to forge his father's will and other documents. I have the originals here, and the fakes. You can see where I changed the names and the amounts." For the next hour, they laid out the whole story. Natalie described the attack, Noah confirmed finding her in the snow and hearing her account, and Jessup showed the documents, explaining in detail how he had altered them at Thomas's request. Pike listened to all of it, his expression growing darker by the minute. "This is a hell of a mess," he said finally. "If what you are saying is true, Thomas Reed has committed fraud and attempted murder. But I got to tell you, he is well liked in this town. A lot of folks are going to have a hard time believing this." "Then look at the evidence," Natalie said firmly. "Compare the documents, check Martin's story. Talk to people who saw Thomas and me together in the days before he attacked me. I'm telling the truth, Sheriff." Pike studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, I will investigate. But you need to understand, this is going to get ugly. Thomas is not going to take these accusations lying down." "I am counting on it," Natalie said. Pike sent deputies to bring in Thomas and Jacob for questioning. While they waited, Noah and Natalie stayed in the sheriff's office, both tense with anticipation. This was it. The moment where everything would either come together or fall apart. Thomas arrived first, all false concern and righteous indignation. "Natalie, thank God you are all right. Where have you been? We have been searching everywhere for you." "Save it, Thomas," Natalie said coldly. "I know what you did. We all know." Thomas's eyes narrowed, and for just a moment, Natalie saw the truth beneath the mask, the hatred, the calculation. Then it was gone, replaced by confused innocence. "What are you talking about? Natalie, have you been drinking? Are you ill?" "She is accusing you of attempted murder," Pike said flatly. "Says you and your uncle took her out into the wilderness and left her to die." Thomas laughed, but it sounded forced. "That is insane! Why would I do such a thing? She is my sister." "For the ranch," Noah said, speaking up for the first time. "For the inheritance your father left. You wanted it all for yourself." Thomas looked at Noah as if seeing him for the first time. "And who are you?" "The man who found her in the snow and saved her life. The man who's going to make sure you pay for what you did." "This is ridiculous," Thomas blustered. "Natalie was upset after Pa died. She said she needed time away. I've not seen her in over a week, and now she comes back with these wild accusations and some stranger backing her up?" He turned to Pike. "Sheriff, surely you can see this is some kind of scheme. Maybe this man has convinced her to lie, hoping to get money out of me." But Pike held up the documents. "What about these? We have got your father's original will, and we have got forged versions that change the terms. Your name is all over the transaction records with Jessup." Thomas went very still. "I do not know anything about forged documents." "Then why did you meet with Martin Jessup 4 times in the last 2 weeks? We have got witnesses who saw you." For the first time, doubt flickered across Thomas's face. He was realizing that this was not going to be as easy to dismiss as he had thought. When Jacob arrived 20 minutes later, his story contradicted Thomas's in several key ways. Pike pounced on the inconsistencies, pushing both men until their stories began to unravel. And when he brought in other witnesses, people who had seen Thomas and Jacob loading Natalie onto a horse and riding out of town, people who had heard Thomas bragging about coming into money soon, the case began to solidify. By late afternoon, Thomas and Jacob were in custody, charged with attempted murder and fraud. Jessup was released into Natalie's custody with instructions not to leave town until the trial. And Natalie found herself standing outside the sheriff's office, breathing in the cold air, hardly believing it was over. "You did it," Noah said beside her. "You beat them." Natalie turned to him, her eyes shining with tears of relief and triumph. "We did it. I never could have done this without you, Noah." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warm and almost boyish. "I do not know. You are pretty formidable on your own. I just helped things along." They walked back to Mrs. Chen's boarding house in comfortable silence, the weight of the past days finally lifting from Natalie's shoulders. But with the immediate crisis resolved, she found herself thinking about what came next. The ranch was hers now, or would be once the legal proceedings were complete. She could go back, hire new staff, rebuild what her father had created. But the thought of doing it alone made her heart ache. That evening, over dinner in Mrs. Chen's cozy kitchen, Natalie finally voiced what had been on her mind all day. "What will you do now?" she asked Noah. "Go back to your cabin? Back to trapping?" Noah looked down at his plate, his expression unreadable. "I suppose so. That's my life." "It does not have to be." The words came out before Natalie could stop them. "I mean, you could do something else, if you wanted." He looked up at her and she saw the question in his eyes. The hope, carefully guarded, but there nonetheless. "What did you have in mind?" he asked quietly. Natalie took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "The ranch needs help. It has been neglected these past weeks, and with Thomas and Jacob gone, there is no one to run it. I will need to hire a foreman, someone I can trust, someone who knows the land and is not afraid of hard work." She met his eyes directly. "I would like it to be you." Noah was quiet for so long that Natalie began to fear she had overstepped. Then, slowly, he smiled. "I do not know much about running a ranch. But you know horses and cattle. You know the land. And I trust you, Noah. That is worth more than experience." Is that the only reason you are asking? His voice was soft, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made her pulse quicken. Trust? Natalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. No, she admitted. It is not the only reason. I do not want to say goodbye to you. These past days, working together, talking with you, I have felt more alive than I have in years. More myself. And I think maybe you feel something similar. Noah pushed back from the table and stood, and for a horrible moment Natalie thought he was leaving. But instead, he came around to her side and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. I have been trying not to let myself feel what I feel, he said, his voice rough with emotion, telling myself it was too soon, that you were vulnerable, that I had no right. But the truth is, I have not felt this way about anyone in my entire life. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and every time I look at you, I think about how close I came to not finding you that day, how easily you could have died before I ever knew you existed. Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks. I think about that too, about how you saved me in more ways than one. You did not just pull me out of the snow, Noah. You gave me back my life, my future. Then let me be part of that future, Noah said, his hands tightening on hers. Not just as your foreman, but as something more. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a week, but yes, Natalie interrupted, yes to all of it, yes to you. Noah stood and pulled her up with him, and then they were kissing, finally, his arms around her and hers around his neck. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate, full of all the fear and hope and longing they had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. We will do this right, Noah said against her hair. Proper courting, proper wedding. I am not going to give anyone in this town reason to talk about you. Natalie laughed through her tears. I do not care what anyone in this town thinks. Maybe not, but I care about you and I am going to do this the right way. They stayed at Mrs. Chen's for another week while the legal proceedings moved forward. During that time, Noah was a constant presence at Natalie's side, attending meetings with lawyers, helping her go through her father's papers, making plans for the ranch's future. But he also courted her properly, bringing her flowers from the hothouse at the general store, taking her for walks through town, sitting with her in the evenings and talking about everything and nothing. The people of Rock Springs watched with interest as the story of Thomas Reed's downfall spread through town. Some were skeptical at first, unwilling to believe that the charming Thomas could have done such terrible things. But as more evidence came out, as more witnesses came forward, public opinion shifted. Natalie Reed, once dismissed as a grieving woman with wild accusations, became a figure of sympathy and admiration. And Noah Ashford, the quiet trapper who had saved her life, became something of a local hero. The trial was swift. With Jessup's testimony and the physical evidence of the forged documents, Thomas and Jacob had no real defense. They were convicted of fraud and attempted murder and sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. Natalie sat in the courtroom and watched them being led away in chains, feeling not triumph but sadness. They had been family once. Thomas had been her playmate as a child, but greed had twisted him into something monstrous. With the legal matter settled, Natalie could finally return to the ranch. Noah helped her hire new staff to replace the men Thomas had employed, good, honest workers who were loyal to Natalie rather than her brother. Together, they began the work of restoring the ranch to its former glory. Noah proved to be a natural leader, firm but fair with the ranch hands, and his knowledge of the land and animals was invaluable. Natalie watched him work with growing admiration and love. He had become the center of her world, the person she turned to for advice and comfort and joy. 3 months after her rescue from the snow, on a warm spring day with wildflowers blooming across the meadows, Noah asked Natalie to marry him. They were standing by the stream that ran through the eastern pasture, watching the horses graze nearby. I do not have much to offer you, he said, turning to face her. I'm just a former trapper with a small cabin and not much money. But I love you, Natalie Reed. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. Natalie smiled through happy tears. You have already given me everything that matters. You gave me my life back. You gave me hope and strength and love. Of course, I will marry you. The wedding took place in June, in the small church in Rock Springs with half the town in attendance. Mrs. Chen cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Natalie wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk all these years. Noah wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortably formal until he saw Natalie walking down the aisle, and then his face transformed with such love and joy that she nearly stumbled. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life brought them. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Noah kissed her with a gentleness that belied the strength of his feeling, and the congregation erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed an army. People ate and drank and danced, celebrating not just a wedding, but a new beginning. Natalie and Noah moved through the crowd together, accepting congratulations and well wishes, but their eyes kept finding each other across the space, drawn like magnets. When the sun began to set and the guests finally began to leave, Noah swept Natalie up in his arms and carried her into the house, into what was now their home. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the room that had once been her father's, but was now theirs, redecorated and made new. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, testing out the name with obvious pleasure. "Mr. Ashford," she replied, smiling up at him. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other with hands and lips in whispered words. It was everything Natalie had dreamed and more, this joining of bodies and souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, Noah's fingers trailing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I keep thinking about that day I found you," he said quietly. "How close it was. How easily I could have taken a different path, checked a different trap line. You could have died there, and I never would have known you existed." Natalie turned in his arms to face him. "But you did find me, and I did not die. We are here now, together. That is what matters." "I know, but it makes me think about how fragile everything is, how quickly things can change." He pulled her closer. "I'm going to spend every day being grateful that I found you, that I get to love you. And I'm going to spend every day loving you back," Natalie promised. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their joint management, becoming known for the quality of its horses and cattle. Noah proved to have a gift for breeding stock, carefully selecting which animals to keep and which to sell. Natalie handled the business side, negotiating contracts and managing the books with the same sharp intelligence that had helped her outwit her brother. They worked side by side, equal partners in every sense of the word. The ranch hands respected them both, and the people of Rock Springs came to regard the Ashfords as pillars of the community. 2 years after their wedding, Natalie gave birth to their first child, a son they named William after her father. Noah was present for the birth, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, even as he turned pale at the sight of so much blood. When the doctor finally placed the squalling infant in his arms, Noah looked down at his son with such wonder that Natalie fell in love with him all over again. "He is perfect," Noah breathed. "We made something perfect." "We did," Natalie agreed, exhausted but happy. William was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Rose, who had her father's dark hair and her mother's sharp eyes. And 3 years after that came another son, James, who was the image of his grandfather William. The house filled with laughter and noise, with the chaos of children growing and playing and learning. Noah proved to be a devoted father, patient and kind, but firm when needed. He taught his children to ride and rope, to read the land and the sky, to treat animals with respect and kindness. Natalie taught them their letters and numbers, told them stories of their grandfather and the ranch's history, instilled in them the values of hard work and honesty. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were in bed, Noah and Natalie would sit on the porch and watch the sunset over the land they had built together. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if Thomas had succeeded?" Noah asked one such evening, his arm around her shoulders. Natalie leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent. "Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on it. That is not the life I am living." "No," Noah agreed. "This is the life you are living, with me and our children and this ranch. This is real." "This is real," Natalie echoed, "and it is more than I ever dared to dream. That day in the snow, when I thought I was dying, I could not have imagined this, any of this. You saved me in every way a person can be saved, Noah Ashford. He kissed the top of her head. You saved me too. I was just existing before you came into my life, going through the motions. You gave me purpose, family, love. I am the one who should be grateful. Then we are both grateful, Natalie said, and both lucky. Over the years, they watched their children grow into capable, compassionate adults. William took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations, showing his father's gift with animals and his mother's head for business. Rose became a teacher, opening a small school in Rock Springs where she taught children of all backgrounds, carrying on her mother's belief in education and equality. James studied law and became a lawyer in Cheyenne, though he visited the ranch often, always eager to ride the land he had grown up on. When they became grandparents, Noah and Natalie found a new kind of joy in watching their grandchildren run through the same fields and streams where their own children had played. The cycle continued, life renewing itself, the legacy of the Reed Ranch and the Ashford name carrying forward into new generations. But through all the changes and growth, the core remained the same. Noah and Natalie, partners in every sense, still finding ways to make each other laugh, still turning to each other first in times of trouble or joy, still very much in love. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, they renewed their vows in a simple ceremony in the ranch's garden. Noah's hair was gray now, and Natalie's face bore the lines of a life well lived. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people they had been at the beginning. The broken woman in the snow, the lonely trapper who found her. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. 30 years, Noah said that night as they lay in bed, his hand finding hers in the darkness like it had 1,000 times before. And I still fall more in love with you every day. Natalie squeezed his hand, her heart full. Only 30? We have got at least 30 more ahead of us. I am counting on it, Noah said, and pulled her close. They lived to see their great-grandchildren, to watch the ranch continue to thrive through changing times and challenges. They faced hardships together, harsh winters and dry summers, illnesses and losses. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. When Noah passed away at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Natalie beside him, the entire county turned out for his funeral. He had become a legend in his own right, the man who had saved Natalie Reed and helped her reclaim her birthright, who had built one of the most successful ranches in Wyoming through honest work and careful stewardship. Natalie mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had been given 45 years together, years filled with love and laughter and purpose. She kept his memory alive through stories told to grandchildren and great-grandchildren, through the continued success of the ranch, through the way she still saw him in the land he had loved. She lived another 7 years after his death, long enough to see her youngest great-grandchild born, long enough to ensure that the ranch would continue in capable hands. When her time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by family. Her last words a whispered, "Thank you," to the man who had saved her life all those years ago in the snow. They buried her beside Noah on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and the family they had built together. The tombstone was simple, bearing just their names and dates and a single line. Love found in the snow, lasting forever. And the ranch continued, generation after generation, a testament to what two people could build when they found each other against all odds. The story of Natalie and Noah became family legend, told and retold to children who sat wide-eyed listening to tales of betrayal and rescue, of justice and revenge, of love blooming in the unlikeliest of places. The old house still stood, weathered but strong, filled with the echoes of their laughter and love. The land still produced fine horses and cattle. And on cold winter days when the snow fell thick and heavy, the Ashford descendants would sometimes stand at the window and think about how it all began, with a woman left for dead, and a man who refused to ride away, who chose instead to stop and help and love. They thought about how one act of kindness had rippled forward through time, creating families and futures that would never have existed otherwise. It was a story of the Wild West in its truest sense. Not just cowboys and cattle, not just survival and struggle, but also redemption and connection. two people finding each other in a vast and often cruel landscape, choosing to build something good and lasting together, choosing love over bitterness, hope over despair, partnership over solitude, and in the end, that was the real legacy of Natalie and Noah Ashford. Not just the ranch or the money or the descendants, but the proof that even in the harshest environments, even after the deepest betrayals, love could take root and flourish. That two broken people could make each other whole. That a moment of compassion in the snow could change everything, forever. The Wild West was full of stories of violence and greed, of people who took what they wanted without thought for the cost. But it was also full of stories like this one, of people who chose differently, who saw someone in need and helped, who built something lasting through dedication and love. These were the stories that mattered, the ones that got passed down and remembered, the ones that reminded future generations what it meant to be human in the best sense of the word. So the story of the woman left for dead in the snow and the cowboy who saved her lived on, a bright thread in the tapestry of the American West, a reminder that even in the darkest moments hope could be found. That even when family betrayed you, love could find you. That endings could become beginnings and that the worst days of your life could lead to the best. Natalie and Noah's story was one of transformation and triumph, of two people who found each other at the exact right moment and built a life more wonderful than either could have imagined alone. It was a story of the West, yes, but more than that, it was a story of the human heart and its capacity for resilience, forgiveness, and love. And it was a story with the best kind of ending, the kind where everyone who mattered lived long and well and happy, where justice was served and love prevailed, where the good guys won and built something beautiful that lasted for generations. In Rock Springs, Wyoming, they still told the story. The children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren still gathered on holidays and birthdays, still walked the land their ancestors had saved and built, and when the snow fell heavy in the winter, they remembered. They remembered the woman who survived what should have killed her, the man who refused to leave her behind, and the love story that began in the coldest, darkest moment and bloomed into something that warmed generations. That was the true end of the story. Not death or loss, but continuation. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just two people falling in love, but that love spreading outward in ever-widening circles, touching dozens, then hundreds of lives, creating ripples that would extend far beyond what Natalie and Noah could have ever imagined that first day in the cabin when she woke up alive and looked into the kind eyes of her rescuer. It was a story about how the best things in life often come from the worst moments, how trauma can transform into triumph, how near death can lead to the most vibrant life, how hate from those who should love you can be overcome by love from unexpected sources. It was about choice and chance, about the decisions people make in crucial moments, about the difference one person can make by simply refusing to look away when they see someone in need. And ultimately, it was a love story, the kind that the West was built on even if the history books did not always record them. The kind where a man and a woman became partners in the truest sense, building something together that neither could have achieved alone, where they faced the world side by side, equal and united, and created a legacy that would outlast them both by generations. That was the happy ending they earned, and the one they gave to all who came after them. And it was an ending that, in its own way, was really just another beginning. The start of a family saga that would continue as long as there were Ashfords on that ranch in Wyoming, remembering the woman who was left for dead in the snow and the cowboy who brought her back, not just to life, but to love.